Pecha, and I'm doing the last part of the Skull and Bones mini-series for the Sazrael News Network YouTube channel. Now previously, in other episodes 1 and 2, we talked about the Nazi connection to the Skull and Bones Secretsociety and the eugenics and the involvement of the members in the eugenics movement. We of course talked about the founding of the Skull and Bones and about some of the members and the members' connection to each other and what they go up to. In this last episode, we'll be going further into what the members get up to, and we'll talk about the Hegelian philosophy, which is the ideology that these people adhere to. So we'll start right away with Hegelian Philosophy of Skull and Bones by Anthony Sutton, and this is an excerpt from his book America's Secret Establishment: An Introduction to the Order of the Skull and Bones. The state is absolute. How can there exist a common objective when members are apparently acting in opposition to one another? Probably the most difficult task in this work will be to get across to the reader what is really an elementary observation, that the objective of the order is neither left nor right. Left and right are artificial devices to bring about change, and the extremes of political left and political right are vital elements in a process of controlled change. The answer to this seeming political puzzle lies in Hegelian logic. Remember that both Marx and Hitler, the extremes of left and right, presented as textbook enemies, evolved out of the same philosophical system, Hegelianism. That brings screams of intellectual anguish from Marxists and Nazis, but it is well known to any student of political systems. The dialectical process did not originate with Marx as Marxists claim, but with Fichte and Hegel in late 18th and early 19th century Germany. In the dialectical process, a clash of opposites brings about a synthesis. For example, a clash of political left and political right brings about another political system. A synthesis of the two, neither left nor right. This conflict of opposites is essential to bring about change. Today this process can be identified in the literature of the Trilateral Commission, where change is promoted as conflict management in terms to bring about this change. In the Hegelian system, conflict is essential. Furthermore, for Hegelian systems based on Hegel, the state is absolute. The state requires complete obedience from the individual citizen. An individual does not exist for himself in these so-called organic systems, but only to perform a role in the operation of the state. He finds freedom only in obedience to the state. There was no freedom in Hitler's Germany. There is no freedom for the individual under Marxism. Neither will there be in the New World Order. And if it sounds like George Orwell's 1984, it is. In brief, the state is supreme and conflict is used to bring about the ideal society. Individuals find freedom in obedience to the rules. Now we've got an example of this being used by John Kerry, and this is from a BBC article on news from the Middle East. So this is Kerry supports ousting of Assad to form new government, then contradicts himself. So a quote from John Kerry: "The challenge that we face in Syria today is nothing less than to chart a course out of hell." Mr. Kerry said this in a speech at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace think tank in Washington, D.C. Again, while finding a way forward on Syria will not be easy, it is the most promising opportunity for a political opening we have seen. He added, "At the end of the day, nothing would do more to bolster the fight against Daesh than a political transition that sidelines Assad so that we can unite more of the country against extremism." So here he is, of course, talking about the dissolution of Syria and the toppling of Assad. But then he stresses that the US and Russia also share common ground, arguing that both wanted a united secular Syria. So here he is promoting the dissolution of Syria and Assad, but then talking about how they and Russia want a united Syria, which seems opposing. But with this Hegelian philosophy, it is this left and right that promotes this central cause, a synthesis of the two, enables a change which they want to see. And this ties in with the whole, everything that happened with Iraq and the war in Iraq. And we will get into that a little bit later, and I'll connect it all together for you. I have another source. Kerry pushed for use of force against Syria. Of course he did. And we've got Kerry's royal bloodline connections, which is important to note because these Skull and Bones members often have royal bloodline connections, and it's I think important to know because they're very powerful families. He's related to Tsar Ivan the Terrible, who was Emperor of Byzantium and the Shahs of Persia. He's related to Henry II and Henry III, and Richard Lionheart, who was responsible for the Crusades in the Middle East. So we'll now move on to George Bush. Like I say, we'll tie this all together. I'm just going through what they got up to individually at first. So George Bush, he signed off on most executions in Texas. So this is from a New York Times article. Oh no, sorry, that's a different one. I'm not sure which article this is from, but I found it out online. So, no state executes as many people as Texas, and no American governor has put more people to death than the state's current governor, George W. Bush. Obviously this was at the time, but he was the governor. Bush has signed off on 135 executions since he took office in 1995, about one death every 2 weeks. In his first term of 4 years, 79 people died. By contrast, Bush's predecessor, Ann Richards, approved 50 executions in her term as governor. Knowing that Texas voters like to see convicts pay the ultimate price, Bush has made a priority of cutting out some of the red tape involved in actually killing a condemned prisoner. On the campaign trail in 1994, he promised to shorten the time taken for death row appeals, and he followed up as soon as he took office. He has since gone out of his way to oppose bills that might have slowed the pace of executions, and he's given a reprieve or a commutation only twice, proof of his deep faith in the system in Texas that finds alleged murderers and sends them to their deaths. So like I say, we're going into more about the members and what they get up to, because we can't find the actual documents from the Skull and Bones, their inner talkings and workings as such, but we can deduce it ourselves from what they get up to. We can link them all back to Skull and Bones and then see what they're all up to. And it becomes apparent that from the Nazi connection to the involvement in eugenics, George Bush seeming likes to execute people, John Kerry's push for war, and the dissolution of Syria, all whilst promoting other views which would seem more wholesome, united America, united people, all this kind of thing. And it would seem that they're so much in contrast, how can you make sense of them? But again, when you point to Hegelian philosophy, which is what the Skull and Bones took as their ideology out of Germany in the 18th and 19th century, then it begins to make more sense. So more on George Bush. These are articles that you can look up more for yourselves. Obviously, if I go into them too in depth here, then there won't be enough time and you'll get bored. So George Bush oversaw the build-up to the economic crash of 2009. Now, he didn't have to have a direct part as such. He didn't have to order the destruction of something, but he definitely oversaw the mechanisms that became the crash of 2009 that we all know very well. He oversaw destruction of education through something called the NCLB. That's something, again, that's quite in-depth that you have to look out for. I've got the source article here, which you can research into yourself, how they basically dumbed down America. This is something that a lot of people talk about, the dumbing down of America and the American education system. There's a lady who was some kind of head of education, and she's written a book about it. I'm not sure what her name is, but I could find that for you if you're interested. But this is solely to do with Bush. Of course, he conspired with Blair to invade Iraq. This was in mainstream media in the UK at the time, I remember it. This was from the Daily Mail, where there's emails between the two, where Blair, on the outside was saying that they were going to take a careful approach and they weren't looking to invade, when in emails to Bush, this was completely the opposite to what he actually wanted to do. And they were conspiring together to invade. Of course, he oversaw the 9/11 attacks and its cover-up. 9/11 is such a massive subject, I can't get into it here, but I believe it's needless to say that it was orchestrated, and the official story was not how they say it was. There's so much information out there saying that the mainstream line was false, that it's apparent to me that it's easy to conclude that it was a setup, really. So Bush, obviously at the time he was overseeing it. There's things like the NORAD, the air defense, to say it simply, that would scramble jets to protect the American airspace. They weren't operating correctly on that day. There's various things, and he of course oversaw it all as president. And its cover-up when they did the 9/11 Commission, it was all appointed from Bush and his cabinet. And one of the first people he tried to head the investigation was Henry Kissinger. And this received a lot of criticism because the 9/11 Commission was supposed to be independent, and with Henry Kissinger it was not going to be at all. He did have to step down because he faced so much criticism. But it's just classic them trying to cover it up. Of course they did successfully manage to cover it up anyway. It was just with Henry Kissinger it was so blatantly obvious what they were trying to do. I mean, he's a big insider guy. He's not a Skull and Bones member, but he's been heavily involved in the Trilateral Commission, which is similar to the World Economic Forum, and its goal is to unite the whole world in this new world order. And I've got some more information about him as well, to do with the Bohemian Club, Bohemian Grove, and him going to this very secret gathering for elite members of the society. And he's been known to go there. So, an insider guy that Bush tried to get to cover up the 9/11. And finally, Bush is related to royalty. And now I've not pulled up exactly who he's related to, as I did for John Kerry, but I do have the source information for that. Again, related to royalty. There's a group called Burke's Peerage who were betting on who would be the next president of the United States because of their royal bloodline and the amount of royal ancestors they could trace. And they betted correctly between Bush and Al Gore because Bush had more blue blood. Al Gore still had royal ancestors, but not as many as Bush. So I think it's almost coincidental that out of all of the people in the United States, you find these few that are either linked to secret societies or have connections to the royal blood, or both. It's just the odds are quite high, in my opinion. So that was George Bush and John Kerry, some of what they got up to and what they're trying to achieve. And then we have, I will connect it now to Paul Brehmer. Paul Brehmer, the Brehmer family, involved in Yale for a long time. I haven't got the proof for Paul Brehmer being Skull and Bones, only that multiple members of his family are at Yale University. But someone with this amount of power most likely was Skull and Bones. And I have seen it claimed that he was Skull and Bones. But he's probably someone that you've not heard of. But Paul Brehmer was US ambassador to Iraq in 2003. I've got the article of the impact of his decisions in Iraq. Because this joins John Kerry. I mean, they're all obviously in office at the same time. John Kerry, George Bush, and Paul Brehmer, where they falsified the reasons for getting into Iraq. Of course, invaded, destroyed the government there, and left a huge power vacuum, which then enabled extremists to gain a foothold in the area and allowed them to then fund proxy armies to topple people like Assad and to sow chaos in the area, which they knew was going to happen. And this ties all that together with John Kerry and his policy on Syria, George Bush, what he did in the invasion of Iraq and the cover-up of 9/11, who are the true perpetrators of it, never got found out officially, and Paul Brehmer and what he did. So in April 2003, he headed the Coalition Provisional Authority, which, sorry, so the light has blinded me. But with this was the administration that ran Iraq after it was occupied by the US. And this made him the most powerful American citizen out of the US at that time, apparently, because the things he was able to do is quite incredible, and I didn't know about this man until I started doing research. So he signed off on something called Order Number 1, which was a week into his office. He banned the Ba'ath Party in Iraq, launching what became known as the de-Ba'athification of Iraqi society. Then we have, on the 23rd of May, this is the big one, he signed off on Order Number 2, called Coalition Provisional Authority Number 2, Dissolution of Entities. And this disbanded the entire Iraqi military, the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of State, the intelligence establishments, and the whole security apparatus. This, of course, led to the power vacuum in the area and the rise of extremist groups such as ISIS. They were fully aware that this would happen, and it enabled them to justify more military presence in the area, and, like I said, the use of proxy armies. I've got the source for that. I think that's the... Oh no, that's not the New York Times when I said it earlier. That's MiddleEastMonitor.com. Just massive sweeping powers, and this good guy thing about them fighting for freedom of the world. Yet what they did was completely the opposite. It's this to and fro, this Hegelian philosophy, and it can be quite confusing, but once you get the gist of it, it's easy to understand how they manipulate things. Because really, regardless of what they said, what happened was the complete destruction of Iraq. And I mean, they operated as, I'm not saying what Saddam did was right or that he was the greatest leader, but he did offer stability in the region, and he kept control of a lot of warring parties, political parties or militaristic parties. And when he was gone, the whole area went into chaos, and obviously we've seen that since. And I don't have the sources now, but I did see a document which was, I think they were world leaders. It may have just been the US administration, but they were talking about how they knew that this would happen, that by doing this in Iraq, it would create a power vacuum, and this would give rise to extremist militaristic entities, such as Daesh and ISIS. And that's exactly what happened. And there's a lot of evidence to show that the US administration, along with the UK, were funding some of these parties, some of these groups. Like what happened in Syria. That Assad wasn't attacking his own people, and that these militaristic groups that came about, what was it, the Free National Syrian Army or something, were not at all independent. They were being funded. There was also, was it a UN general? Whenever I try and find the source, I can't get it. But they basically listed the countries that they would want to invade, and Syria was one of them. And this gave them the reason they needed to, because the invasion of Iraq through George Bush and the cover-up of 9/11, the push from John Kerry in Syria, because of the chaos in that region, because of what Paul Brehmer did, where he wiped out the whole of the Iraqi infrastructure and just left for this huge power vacuum, which enabled people at ISIS to take a foothold. So that's really it for George Bush, John Kerry and Paul Brehmer. I will link you the articles and the sources so you can look into George Bush, the hangman of Texas, John Kerry's bloodline connections to royalty, his push for conflict in Syria. Meanwhile, they were promoting good things. John Kerry, another thing he did, destroying industry in America, because a lot of people have heard about the Great Reset now. The Great Reset is really just the New World Order being returned from the World Economic Forum, but this idea has been around for a very long time, the globalization. And in a world government, a one world order, you can't have independent countries that can operate with sovereignty. You need them to be dependent on each other, which I think is why you've got the rise of China now. And I'll say it here, but obviously Trump's whole thing was to reindustrialize America and give more power to America, because the industry had been gutted, just like the industry in the UK was gutted by Thatcher. And now we have to order most of our things from outside of the country. We don't produce enough ourselves to be independent. If we truly wanted to be independent and survive on our own, we wouldn't be able to do it, because we've been made so interdependent on these other countries. And this is another goal of these globalists, these elitists. And John Kerry with Skull and Bones is no different. Of course, the whole reason I'm saying this information is to link it back to the secret societies, and so we can begin to look at who the real advocates of this change are. Because it's not Boris Johnson, it's not even a Bush or whoever. It goes so much deeper. These are just frontmen. But with being able to see the secret societies, at least some of these ones that are more obvious, you can begin to understand how it works and how deep it really goes. But this is words from Trump. Now, I'm not, I'm not a Trump fan or anything, but this is just objectively some information, some factual information. Words from Trump on effects of the Paris Climate Agreement that John Kerry signed the US into. And these are, like I said, words from Trump. According to this same study, by 2040, compliance with the commitments put into place by the previous administration would cut production for the following sectors: paper down 12%, cement down 23%, iron and steel down 38%, coal, and I happen to love the coal miners, down 86%, natural gas down 31%. The cost to the economy at this time would be close to 3 trillion in lost GDP and 6.5 million industrial jobs, while households would have $7,000 less income, and in many cases, much worse than that. Not only does this deal subject our citizens to harsh economic restrictions, it fails to live up to our environmental ideals. And Biden, who is a massive insider guy, has just signed them back into the Paris Climate Agreement. I hope I'm making myself clear here. Obviously, this is another one. They say, we need to save the planet, we need to do the good. But then, on the other hand, they're then destroying the industry. And this is how they forge their way through things. And really to create this one world government state. But a lot of people can't see it, because they use this way of promoting themselves as good and promoting the things that they're doing as good. But then, they've got Trump, and Trump's now the bad guy because he was extreme in what he did, apparently. But all along, the main line keeps tracking on through. This march to a one world government. There's the false flag events as well, and problem reaction solution that David Icke calls them. That is COVID-19. COVID-19, they've used it we need to lock down and isolate and to protect ourselves. But the economy is being destroyed, and then because of that, they're saying things like Build Back Better and the Great Reset of Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum, which will change society irrevocably. It's all mind games, and this to and fro, Hegelian like philosophy. But enough on those guys. Apart from I haven't provided really the proof that they are skull and bones yet. But we've got this was from Times Magazine, August 7th, the year 2000, volume 156, number 6. This is proof of George Bush being a member of Skull and Bones Society. So this is from the interview. In conversation, Bush exudes both a folksy confidence and an eagerness to charm. In a recent 90-minute talk with managing editor Walter Isaacson, he discussed how his family affected his career. This is by Walter Isaacson, George W. Bush. So this is Time magazine. But you, George W. and father, sure shared a lot of the same upbringing. Andover, Yale, even Skull and Bones. Did you have any qualms, say, about joining an elite secret club like Bones? Bush. No qualms at all. I was honoured. I was fairly nonchalant. I didn't view it as a great heritage thing. I didn't take it all that seriously. Time. Demystify it a bit for those who might think it's a cross between a Masonic Lodge and the Trilateral Commission. Did your father show up for your initiation, like your grandfather showed up for his? Bush. Without revealing all the great secrets? I got a few of my old club mates who could demystify it right off the bat. My dad didn't tap me. There was an entry celebration. I can't remember whether my dad showed up or not. I don't think so. What was the most important thing about your family legacy? This was the Time. Bush. The unconditional love I got from my family liberated me. It gave me a sense of security. We were all at a church in Maine recently, and the preacher asked whether anyone in this congregation had a perfect family. And the only hand that went up without hesitation was Dad's. It helped Jeb and me not be afraid of defeat. I mean, a family that operates like this is kind of sickening to be that into it. That's, well, they're brought up to be into it. Then we have Tim Russett. He interviews Kerry and Bush. Kerry in 2006 and Bush in 2004. He died in 2008 at the age of 58, apparently from a cardiac arrest. But he pretty much outright asks them. I'll get the sources for you, but they're quite difficult to get. But he's talking with George Bush, and he says, and he brings it up. He says, "So, Skull and Bones, the Secretsociety. What can you say? Are you a member of it?" And he's like, George Bush starts. He's quite sheepish about it. He's like, "Well, it's so secret we can't even talk about it." And they go on a little bit more, but that's basically admission. And the same thing happens with John Kerry. Words to that effect. I think that's basically confirmation that they're in Skull and Bones. So yeah, this is going on a bit longer, I think. But to conclude that part, for John Kerry, Paul Brehmer, George Bush, all involved in destruction, in war and finance, and education. Like Anthony Sutton said, you don't find these people in the arts, in working in charities, or really working with charities, or really working to help people, or create great music or great art pieces. These people, these Skull and Bones people, are always involved in these hardline professions in society, which change society. There's war, politics, finance, education. So it's quite easy to see what they believe without actually having the documentation. You can see what they believe and what they're working towards achieving. They invaded and dismantled Iraq based off a lie, which was covered up this is all by Skull and Bones members. So you only need certain people in certain positions to be able to achieve what you want. And you can play off each other as well. The Hegelian philosophy, one can promote an apparent opposite to yours, but really in the middle the two synthesize and you achieve what you want to achieve. Invasion and destruction of Iraq, the chaos that was brought about in the region, and the what happened in Syria, which somehow they weren't able to really fully achieve, the toppling of Assad. I sometimes think there may be, as much as these countries and different people link up, I think they have infighting as well. And what Putin did made it very difficult for them to achieve what they wanted to in Syria. As much as I don't think Putin is, the hero that he's been put out sometimes in alternative media. I hope all that makes sense, what the point is I'm trying to get across to you. I don't want to keep repeating myself. But to finish out on, I've just got a few interesting little bits, which I've given you as much proof as I can on them being Skull and Bones members. I left my paper somewhere else. No, here it is. I just wanted to correct something I said in a previous episode as well about Alfonso Taft being the predecessor to the League of Nations. That was incorrect. It was his son that did that, as well as being President of the United States, Skull and Bones member. The first, second was obviously George Bush Senior. Sorry, that just cut out there. I like to try and do a whole video without all these strange edits that are popular on YouTube. But I was just saying, I just wanted to correct what I said in a previous episode about Alfonso Taft being the predecessor for the League of Nations. It was his son, William Howard Taft. Alfonso Taft was Minister of Russia, of course founder of Skull and Bones. But some of the interesting things we have, we've got Ron Rosenbaum's temple footage of Skull and Bones, and I've got the links for this. It's very peculiar. He managed to get a view on the courtyard, and they're doing a mock sacrifice. They're dressed in kind of robes, and you can see one has a dagger and is bringing it up and down and plunging into someone on the floor. Lots of screams. It's very, very peculiar. It doesn't seem too jokey, not some kind of silly frat club thing. Very peculiar and rather dark as well. So there are some articles on Ron Rosenbaum, and because he went to Yale, wasn't a member of Skull and Bones, but then there are other secret societies that operate out of Yale as well, in the different dorms. And he talked to some of them and did his own investigations into things, and he found some apparent stories, one of which was that the members must lie in a coffin naked. And I mean, one is that they have a string attached to their genitalia. One is that they have to masturbate and confess all their secrets, particularly their sexual secrets. Obviously, that's you really giving yourself to the society, and they have a lot of blackmail on you then. And there's also the story about Geronimo's skull. And Geronimo, the Native American, his skull was apparently robbed by Prescott Bush, I think it was, and kept at Skull and Bones. And this was an allegation made, and the tribe that Geronimo was a part of actually later on tried to sue and get back these the bones of Geronimo. That's how much they believed that they'd taken them. So they denied all knowledge of this. The US blocked it, but I don't think they would go to those lengths to do something if there wasn't some truth to it. But they got the source for you, so if you want to have a little look more into Ron Rosenbaum and what he said, there was apparently some, I don't know whether it was him or someone else that broke in as well, and there's floor plans of the mausoleum, which seems pretty normal in a way. It's just dark rooms, austere dark rooms. There's a story about one of the societies having Hitler's silverware set. There's a photo of Skull and Bones members. I think George Bush Jr. is on one of those, maybe just Senior. where they're all in suits, and there's a big grandfather clock behind them, and a table in front of them, and a skull. I'll probably have that pop up for you now. And yeah, I mean the grandfather clock, the death symbolism is that Kronos, the Greek god, is Lord of Time. This is the Lord of Time, Father of Time. The Grim Reaper, the Lord of Death, and Kronos was known in the stories to he ate his own children, and Zeus managed to escape Kronos, and they had their own battle. But yeah, that's what the clock is about. Saturn rules over academics and politics and finance, all those kind of things. It's very austere, regimented, and controlling is the symbolic nature of Saturn. And time is, like I say, the Lord of Death. And that's why they've got the grandfather clock behind them. You find when you research into these societies, it's a lot to do with death, but Saturn, the worship of the planet Saturn. And David Icke's done a lot of work into the sun worship of many, obviously, religions all over the world, and societies and secret societies all over the world. And he's saying with his research that they haven't been worshipping our sun as we know it. They've been worshipping the dead sun, Saturn. And there are other researchers, scientists that have done research to show that Saturn at the time was a lot closer to the Earth, which would make more sense that they would worship Saturn. Why would they worship something that's so far away, just a blink in the sky? But it's worth having a little look at what Ron Rosenbaum said. I've got the audio transcription of what he said, I've got the written article, I've got the footage of him filming that mock sacrifice thing I told you about. I've got a great hub for just general skull and bones information and sources. I've also got the links to Anthony Sutton's books and Chris Milligan's on skull and bones. And then I just wanted to do a quick note on other secret societies. We've got the Bullingdon Boys Club, which I don't think is anywhere near as prestigious as something like Skull and Bones, but it just gives you an idea as to what goes off. You had Boris Johnson and David Cameron were a member of Bullingdon Boys Club, which is supposed to be just a drinking club, but there's quite horrible things that have come out from what they got up to, whether it's mocking homeless people or ordering prostitutes and demeaning them and taking drugs. And one of them, this was the Gaveston Society, which was another one of these drinking clubs. David Cameron and the Pig, if anyone's heard that, where he apparently did some sexual acts on a pig. Can't confirm. Hello, sorry again, it's gone down. So I was just talking about the Gaveston Society and David Cameron and the Pig. Pretty disgusting stuff. I suppose I'm going to have to wrap this up because I've just noticed I've been recording for quite a while. This was supposed to be 20 minutes and it's gone over double that. But yeah, there's some more little clubs that people are in. There's a group called The Group. Apparently, operating out of Oxford. I can't attest to that. There was an MI6 guy who talked about that. I can try and find that for you as well, if you're interested. We've got a reporter breaks into Bohemian Grove. The Bohemian Club, they have a large stone owl called Moloch. We all go around and light torches in the redwoods in America. Exclusively males. Henry Kissinger was spotted there. I think Ronald Reagan was spotted there. I could report managed to break in. Dirk Matheson, so I've got that for you as well. I mean, anyone listening to this probably knows about some of these societies anyway, these groups. And we've got the P2 Lodge on trial for conspiracy. P2, very well known in these communities. This was an article from the Independent, and they were on trial for conspiracy. So the information is there on these groups existing. It's not all crazy kooky stuff. I mean, like I say, if you are watching this, you probably know a bit about things anyway. I'd like this to go out to the majority of people, but obviously the majority of people don't know, and they don't look into this kind of thing, and it all just sounds crazy anyway. Even with all the evidence and the information that you give to people, sometimes it's just never enough. You could have a real legit photo of some of these things, and someone would say that it's not real. So people really have to find out for themselves and to come to an understanding themselves. I just wanted to bring some of that information forward for people that are interested, and give an example of a secret society that operates out of America, to show how it works, and that this is one of many around the world. We've got Bohemian Grove, Bilderberg, P2, obviously Freemasons, the Jesuits, the Rosicrucians. I think I've got something on the Rosicrucians here. There's so many. And just because you know a Freemason or you are a Freemason, there's societies within societies and groups within groups. Just because you're on the outer skirts of Freemasonry doesn't mean you understand what it really is at the core of it. It's all secrecy, compartmentalization. The clerk at the guy at McDonald's, you go in, talk to them, order a burger, something's wrong with your burger. He's like, well, it's nothing to do with me, you know. I'm not the manager, so you need to speak to the manager, because the manager has the authority and the power and the know-how of more of the things that go into making the burger and whatnot. And that's how it works in the world. Compartmentalized information. So just because you meet the front guy doesn't mean you know what's really going off. So I hope this mini-series has been good. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope maybe you learned something. Please share the feedback you've got with me. I know this one I've gone on a little bit, but there's the last one. I wanted to make this the last one, so I'm sorry if it's gone on too much, but I wish you all the best. Please share information that you have with me. I'm always looking to know more, and I will do some more things like this. I'm looking at doing one about the Archons and extraterrestrials, reptilians, and more. So should be some more interesting things to come. Again, thank you very much, and I'm Harry from Saturn News Network. Please take care.